Hello, everyone. My name is Juan Vasquez. Thank you for joining me in today's webinar. We'll be getting started shortly. For those of you just joining the meeting room, if you could acknowledge you can hear my voice okay, simply just type a question into the GoToMeeting, the question section of GoToWebinar control panel, just to acknowledge you can hear me okay. And then we'll be getting started shortly. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Juan Vasquez. I'm the Customer Support Manager for de novo Software. We'll be getting started shortly. So those of you just joining the meeting, if you could just type a note in the question section of GoToWebinar panel that you can hear me okay. We'll be getting started shortly. We have a number of people still entering the meeting room. We'll probably get started in about another minute or two. Okay, it's a little bit after the top of the hour, so I guess we can get started now. Today's webinar will be recorded. For those of you that want to catch up on this, or if you need to leave for any reason, this video will be recorded and posted to our website. Anyone that had registered or is attending this meeting will get an update regarding the link through which you can view this webinar at your leisure, okay? If there are any questions, please feel free to type the questions into the questions section of GoToWebinar control panel. My colleague, Robin Kamacheka, is on the line with us today to help assist in any questions you may have. Okay. So in today's webinar, what we're going to do is we're basically going to talk about some of the new features in FCS Express Clinical Edition, as well as some of the features that are going to be coming out in the next release. Okay. Today's webinar is not necessarily going to focus on how to get started, how to start using FCS Express, or any of the basic functionality of FCS Express. It's basically about what's coming up, what's in the pipeline, what things can be used, or what things that you can look forward to using in FCS Express, either now or coming up in a later release, okay? So for those of you that might not know, FCS Express is listed with the FDA as a medical device. So the reason why we have that listing with the FDA is because our main goal with FCS Express is quality. And we are the first third-party software package to be able to offer this level of control design within a software. And the reason why we have this is because there are several key requirements for IVD use. So anyone that actually applies for a listing with the FDA, there are several overriding principles in the FDA quality systems as described in CFR 21 CFR Part 820. Okay, and that extends to FCS Express specifically. And it's all about documenting the quality of the software, making sure that what we're actually producing is actually a quality software, a reliable software, and a consistently producing software. Okay, so as part of the requirements, we're required to document a commitment to quality during all phases of software development. Okay, so as we're actually writing up plans into what the overall design is going to be, once we actually start coding, we need to test what we're doing and making sure that it works, whether that's through test cases or actually through some type of internal testing. Anytime there's a bug in FCS Express Clinical Edition, we need to immediately notify our clients of any critical bugs that may be found. And as part of the remedy for those bugs, we need to immediately address those and come up with fixes for those bugs as soon as possible, and then provide a release that contains those bug fixes. And also, one of the main key requirements for IVD use is just being able to have these internal and external review processes. So we are consistently reviewing our own documents, as well as having an external auditing team coming into our offices to review our quality control design for FCS Express. Okay. And basically, today's overall webinar is going to focus on a lot of the new features that we're going to either have now or coming up in the future. And probably the first feature I want to talk about that's actually currently in beta is the ability to export to an integrated spreadsheet. So many of you may know that with the release of FCS Express 6, we included a new feature where we actually have the ability to build a spreadsheet directly into an FCS Express layout. And that spreadsheet functions much like a spreadsheet would in Microsoft Excel. Okay, so now what we've done is we have the ability in FCS Express, or we will be having the ability in FCS Express, to directly export data to an internal spreadsheet in an FCS Express layout. Okay, and I'd just like to demonstrate for you how that would work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a layout and show you how this works. Okay, so I have a pretty basic layout. Basically, I'm looking at some bead data. Okay, and I have some bead data. I'm looking at that bead data across several parameters. I'm looking at a median value for a marker for a peak within these plots across various parameters. Okay, you can also see here that in my data list, I have 20 samples that I eventually want to iterate through this FCS Express layout. Okay, so the way we can actually export this data to this spreadsheet is through a new batch action that will be included in FCS Express. Okay, so you'll now see that in the Add Report section, there is now this option to export to spreadsheet. Okay, so when I click on that, it will allow me to select the integrated spreadsheet that's inside my FCS Express layout. And it'll also allow me to format the row options, the column options, any type of header options I want to include in the writing to that integrated spreadsheet. So anyone here familiar with the Excel exports that we offer, whether it's column mode or Excel mode, are probably familiar with a lot of these formatting options. We've just extended it to this integrated spreadsheet option. Okay, so once we've added that to the list, then what we do is we basically add the stats to which we want to add to the spreadsheet. So I have a spreadsheet here. I've already added my export to spreadsheet option, and I've designated the spreadsheet to which I want to write data. Okay, and as part of that, I've also designated the information that I want from my data set to be written to this spreadsheet. Okay, so each one of these stats are basically going to give me a separate column that's going to be written to this spreadsheet, and I'm going to get a separate row for each iteration that I have in my data list. Okay, so the way I would actually utilize this is simply just by running my batch. Again, you'll see how FCS Express will iterate through my data. It will capture whatever stats have been specified as part of that batch action. And you'll see that it'll actually write that data to my spreadsheet. Okay, so again, anyone familiar with our spreadsheets know that a lot of the functionality that you use Microsoft in Microsoft Excel will extend to this integrated spreadsheet. Okay, so a very cool, convenient feature, a great way to iterate data, to write it to a spreadsheet, and if you need to, you can export this to Excel directly as well. So I know a lot of you are out there who are like, yeah, that's a pretty cool tool, but what can I do with it? Well, one of the main reasons why we actually have this tool now is because of another feature that we've included as part of this that we can use with this integrated spreadsheet. And that's Levey Jennings capability. So currently in beta, we have the ability to create Levey Jennings plots. And this ability will actually be available in the next public release of FCS Express. And the idea is that this Levey Jennings plot is a new type of 2D plot that's now available from your Insert tab. And the Levey Jennings plot will allow you to visualize the stability of data over time. Okay. So the way this is going to work is if I go back to my layout, all I need to do is just insert a new plot type on a page of my layout. You'll notice from the Insert tab, we've basically reworked things a little bit to make it a little bit cleaner. But specifically underneath the 2D plot section, you'll see that there's now an other category, where if we click on this, you'll now see that one of the 2D plot types that we can now insert is called Levey Jennings. Okay. So now if I select this, I can draw my Levey Jennings plot. And you'll see that FCS Express will create a Levey Jennings plot where it will show me the mean of my data, and it will show me either 1D, 2D, S3, 3SD plus or minus ranges off of that mean for my data. Okay, and this is all being graphed from that internal spreadsheet that we've exported to over here. Okay. So for any of you that aren't familiar, when we have an integrated spreadsheet in an FCS Express layout, we have a number of different charting tools that are able to visually display that data, where essentially each column that's in that spreadsheet is basically like another parameter in a data file. These Levey Jennings charts are very similar to that. So if I actually click on the X or Y axis here, I'll be able to see what columns are available in that spreadsheet. And I'll be able to visualize that data and see what the trends are for that. Okay. Now with these Levey Jennings charts, we do follow the Westgard rules. So we do have the ability to show various outliers depending on what you need. So whether you want to see 1SD, 2SD, 3SD plus or minus, you do have the ability to do that. So the way to access the ways that you can actually format these Levey Jennings plots is by right-clicking on a Levey Jennings plot, clicking on Format, and from the Overlays category, you'll see that there are a number of different features that can be formatted regarding the Westgard rules. Okay, so these Westgard rules will allow you to control determine the out-of-control events, and you can basically just deselect or select the outliers that you want to see within that chart. Okay, you can also format the various shapes for an in control point or an out control point, and also the various lines. So for your 1SD range, your 2SD range, and so on, you do have the ability to format the look and feel of each one of those to make them pop out. Okay. Now, because we are batching this, the same rules that always apply to any type of batch process that you would run in FCS Express are still maintained here. So regardless of what batch actions you have, whether you have just a simple batch action, or maybe you have a list of 10 batch actions, different PDFs being exported, maybe you're archiving your data, you're printing it, maybe you're exporting to Excel or some other type of report, maybe you have some type of LIS integration that's integrated as part of this batch processing. This does not change the overall comprehensive feature of batch processing in FCS Express, okay? So for those of you that are familiar, there are various options in FCS Express. So if you actually want to pause between your data, you can actually tell FCS Express to pause. Okay, so the same rules that have always applied to batch processing in FCS Express still apply here. So as I batch process through my data, if I wanted to pause and tweak gates or markers between each of those data, those still apply. That's a fundamental feature of batch processing in FCS Express. That's been available in FCS Express for as long as I could remember. And I've been with the company now for about a little over 8 years. Okay. Again, if there are any questions regarding any of the features that you see today, please feel free to enter the questions into the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll be happy to answer them as we go along. Okay, so Levey, Jennings, we're certainly excited about that. One thing to realize is that a lot of the features that you'll see today that are either available in our latest release of FCS Express or in an upcoming release, these are all features that were included due to customer feedback. Okay, so if anyone has any features or any ideas, any requests that they may want to see in FCS Express, please let us know. It may take us a while to implement certain things, but if it's doable, we will certainly implement it. If it makes sense to the software and makes everyone's life a little bit easier, yeah, we would certainly consider adding various features to the software, no doubt. And that's where features like Levey Jennings have come to play. A new feature we've also added, and that's actually currently available in our latest release, is the ability to add overlays to contour plots. Now, historically, contour plots have basically only been able to have one layer of data. And a contour plot, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's basically a type of density plot where contour lines are used to show the density of data within a cluster, the density of your events within that cluster. Okay, so now what we can do is we can actually stack multiple files as overlays within that plot with all the different overlay features that we've had for our other plots that have historically been overlay capable. So whether they've been 2D dot plots or color dot plots or 1D histograms, a lot of the rules that you used previously to display overlays in plots now extend to contour plots. So for example, anytime you insert a contour plot into a layout, when you right click on that contour plot, you'll now notice that there is an add overlay option. So any of the ways that you previously added overlays to a plot, whether it's by right clicking on the plot or dragging and dropping your file onto a plot or dragging and dropping a plot on top of another plot, all those methods to add overlays now extend to contour plots. If we format the contour plot, we'll be able to format the overlays from the overlay category that's available from that format menu. So much like we did with 1D histograms or again, any of the other plots that were overlay capable, these features are now extended to contour plots. So we can change the parameters, we can apply a gate to a layer of data, we can actually format these at the same time where if I actually select these, maybe I don't want to see outliers, I can actually just select do not show and just show me my data where it's most dense within that plot and not show outliers at all. Or if I do want to show outliers, maybe I want to increase the dot size just to see those outliers, I have the ability to format these much like I would with my other my other capabilities in FCS Express. Okay. We can also enable a legend. So if I actually want to make a legend visible, I can have that placed in my contour plot. And I can also label the various layers of data through the legend text and have that displayed in there. Okay. So very useful, very convenient, a great way to visualize data. Again, this was a feature that came through a customer request. In FCS Express, we now have a preference where FCS Express will actually remember any manual scaling that you did for the plot parameters in a particular data file. Okay, so previously, or historically, I should say, anytime you created a plot, if you manually adjusted the extended negativity for that plot for a particular parameter, if you created a new plot from that same data set, basically the extended negativity would default to whatever the original value was. It would actually not remember what those manually scaled plot parameters were. So now we actually have preferences in FCS Express that will allow the layout to actually remember the scale formula that was used for any manually scaled plot parameters. So for example, okay. So what we've done is we've actually added new preferences to this information. So if you access your FCS Express user options, like you always have, you'll now notice that within the general category, underneath the miscellaneous options, there is now an option where you can either have FCS Express remember in new layouts the scale formula for manually scaled plot parameters. And that will be a global preference. So any new layout that you create, that new layout will actually inherit that property with it. Also, with any layout in FCS Express, you can actually customize the behavior of that layout through its layout options. So rather than have a global behavior based off of your user preferences, what you can do is you can actually format that layout specifically through its layout options. So from info layout options, if I click on this, you'll notice that the layout options can be formatted specifically where I can tell FCS Express to remember the scaling formula or not to remember the scaling formula, depending on how you actually want that to treat it. And the value of this is just dependent on whatever the global value is, whatever the default value is for your FCS Express user preference, where each new layout will inherit whatever the global preference is. Okay, so the way this works, here, let me just actually duplicate this layout, this plot, just to show you how it functions in real time. So as you know, if you right click on a plot and you choose to format it, one of the categories for that plot that can be formatted is the behavior of the axes. Okay, so the X, Y axes, specifically what kind of scaling is actually applied to the X and Y axes. Now, by default, FCS Express will automatically scale your data using a bi-exponential scale where it would automatically detect the extended negativity for your data. However, there may be situations where you'd want to customize that based off of whatever the default values coming from the original acquisition software are to determine that extended negativity. So what we can do is when we select a plot, we can select an axis, we can override the automatic value, and we can actually use a scale bar to actually change that value. So whether we use a sliding bar to change that value, or if we actually just type in a new number, we have the ability to automatically customize that. Now, previously, it would have been just that individual plot that was affected. But you can see that both of these plots now are being adjusted at the same time. Okay, because if you change the parameter on one plot for a data file, you would expect that same extended negativity if you were looking at that same parameter in another plot. So now that's available here through these preferences, either through a global FCS Express user option, or if you choose to do this through the layout specific options. Okay. Again, if there are any questions about the features that you're seeing today, please feel free to enter the questions into the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll be happy to answer them as we go along. So I can't tell you how many times we've actually gotten comments from various customers about the ability to drag and drop quadrants. And theoretically, yeah, it makes sense. You should be able to drag and drop a quadrant. You should be able to get statistics for that quadrant. You should be able to extract any type of information if you drag and drop a quadrant into a spreadsheet, into a text box, even to add the stats from a quadrant to a batch processing action. Well, we've done that now. So for example, we can now drag and drop quadrants to a spreadsheet, a text box, or if we actually wanted to add stats to a particular batch action, we could do that just by dragging and dropping the quadrant. So if I actually just select a quadrant and just drag and drop into, say, a cell in my spreadsheet, you'll notice that we now have the ability to pick and choose what we want to see displayed from that quadrant. Okay, so we can pick our quadrants, we can pick whatever stat we want, and we can click OK. And you'll see that FCS Express will actually write those stats with a column header as well for whatever statistic you selected as part of that process. Same thing if I had a table or if I had a text box and maybe I just wanted to create a little table to display that data, where if I just take that quad, drag it into a text box, the same idea where maybe rather than select the individual quadrants, maybe I actually want to select the halves. And I will then look at a particular statistic. Okay, and there is one thing I do want to point out with regards to these statistics. We now have added a new statistic where we could actually customize that statistic according to a particular denominator. In other words, anytime we create a percentage, what we can do is we can actually customize what we're using as the denominator in that percentage. Okay, so within our statistics, now we have the ability to offer percent of custom denominator gate. And we have the ability to determine what value is going to be used in the denominator. So as you know, with percentage, we're looking at the number of events from a particular gate divided by the number of events of another gate, whether it's no gate or a particular gate, multiplied by 100. Well, what we can do now is we can actually customize what we want that denominator to be with this new statistic. And once I click OK, you'll see that because I dragged and dropped that quadrant into this text box, I get a nice table that shows me all that data for me automatically. Very convenient. And we can also drag and drop these quadrants now to a batch action like exporting to Excel or exporting to text or any type of LIS component. Maybe you're exporting to XML or a Telenex, whatever it may be that you have as an LIS integration option. Okay, and when we drag and drop to a batch action, it's the same idea. We can come in, select the statistics or the quadrants that we want. So maybe we actually want data from all these quadrants. We can come in, select the statistics. I can select one statistic. If I hold my shift key, I can select multiple adjacent statistics, or if I hold my control key, I can come in and select multiple stats at the same time. And I can simply just click OK, and you'll see that FCS Express will add the value for all those quadrants automatically to that batch action. Okay, and then just like before, when you click Run, FCS Express will process this Excel sheet, this Excel export, with all these values being written as separate columns in that output file, where each stat is a separate column. Each iteration that you may be playing through a particular FCS Express layout will be a separate row in that output. Okay, very convenient, very easy to do, very intuitive. Before, if we wanted to export any type of statistic for a quadrant, we either had to take the plot, drag it into a cell, select the statistic, and then go through the process of selecting the quadrant, where this is much easier. Or if we actually had a quad stat box that was on display on this layout, then we would simply just take stats directly from here and then add them to that spreadsheet for the whatever the output is that we wanted. Okay, much more convenient, much more intuitive, just by dragging and dropping the quadrant. Again, if there are any questions, please feel free to enter them in the question section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll be happy to answer them as we go along. Okay. So in our latest release of FCS Express, we've included the ability to basically refresh our data. And what that means is that there are certain preferences in FCS Express where those preferences only kick in when you load in new data. Okay, so what we've done is we've actually gotten rid of that, because it's kind of annoying if you have a layout and you load data in, maybe, for example, the axes labels aren't necessarily what you want them to be just because you didn't forgot to select a preference ahead of time. Basically, what you had to do previously is you basically had to vacate the data list and then make the preference change and then reload your data for that preference change to kick in. What we've done now is we've actually included a refresh button to the data tab. And the idea is that the refresh button will allow the user to remove data stored in memory and reload that data anew. So for example, in FCS Express 7, we introduced the idea of instrument-specific settings. So if you access your FCS Express user options, as part of the data loading component and the FCS file options, you'll see now that there's a subcategory for instrument-specific settings. And the idea behind this is to customize and tailor FCS Express's behavior with data coming from specific platforms. So if you're a lab that has multiple platforms within that lab, maybe you're validating a Canto, maybe you got the new Fax Lyric, or maybe you had a Coulter XL and you got the new Navios or something. You know that each one of those platforms behaves a little bit differently. Whereas before, in previous versions of FCS Express, you basically had to create a different layout to treat that data a little bit differently. Where here, what we can do now is we can actually create instrument-specific settings to define the behavior of FCS Express to data from those particular platforms. Okay. So here there's a whole list of instrument-specific settings, but specifically you'll notice that for each instrument setting, what we can do is we can customize the keyword to use as a parameter label, for example. Okay. So with this refresh button, what we can do is we can actually come in, select an instrument setting. We can customize the name. To whatever preference we want. We can click OK, but as many of you know, historically, FCS Express never really updates the data. But now what we can do through this refresh button, so if I go to my data tab, you'll notice that underneath the Save Load section, there's now a refresh button, where if I click on that, FCS Express will prompt me for the data that I want to refresh. I can select the data file that I want to refresh. I'll tell the software to reload those selected files. And then you'll notice that my axes labels will change for that data set. Okay, so whether I want my data set, my parameters on my X or Y axes to be displayed a certain way, I could just customize my FCS Express user options, make the changes that I want, and then refresh my data. And that new selection should kick in automatically. Okay, so not only does it extend to your axis labels, maybe you actually want to change the scaling that's being displayed. Maybe rather than see a 4 million range scale on forward scatter, maybe you actually want to truncate that down to 256 or something. It's the same idea. We can actually come in. We could format our instrument specific settings. Where we can customize the scaling options for scatter parameters or fluorescent parameters. And we can actually select a particular scale that we want to display that data in. for that option. Okay. Once I click OK, it's the same idea. I can click refresh, the data file that I want to refresh. And then you'll see how the software will automatically update that data. Okay, very easy, very convenient to use. Again, this is something that came back from user feedback where people needed that immediate response or any changes that we've showed in the display of that data to kick in. Okay. So when we introduced the ability of the integrated spreadsheet in FCS Express, it was really a bit of a game changer for us. It really made things much more convenient for users that basically had to use one piece of software to analyze their data, and then they use something like Excel to report their data. Where the integrated spreadsheet gave them the ability to basically not only analyze, but also report data at the same time within that layout, much like they would have done in Excel. You know, we've had many clinical labs where what they were doing was they were basically analyzing their data in whatever software that they had with the instrument. They were exporting statistics from that, and they were importing it into a spreadsheet template that would basically report the data, only to find out that, you know, if there was any statistic that was off, maybe they were missing a statistic, or maybe another statistic was added. Basically, it just threw off the whole spreadsheet template that we were trying to use. So by being able to integrate this directly into FCS Express, it was really a bit of a game changer for us. And since then, what we've done is we've actually gone through great lengths to make it much more Excel-like, a lot more user-friendly, very intuitive. One of the things that we recently added that's currently available in the current release is our hints for spreadsheet formulas. You know, spreadsheet formulas are probably one of these things, if anyone uses Excel, you're probably just a passing user. You're probably not that much of an expert. You basically know what you know, but outside of that, you really wouldn't know what to do if you need to select another formula. So what we've done is we've actually added these rather detailed hints directly into the spreadsheet that use a lot of the same functions that you would find in Microsoft Excel. Okay. In our integrated spreadsheet, we also have a number of the functions that are FCS Express specific that we could use within that spreadsheet. So for example, if I have a layout where I inserted a spreadsheet, within any cell, if I actually type in an equal sign and start typing, you can see that FCS Express will attempt to autofill for the function that you're trying to select, okay? And all these functions are still available from the same formulas tab up here. So again, if you're looking for average, there it is. If you start typing it out, it will autofill here as well. Okay, it's still defined the same thing. It's much easier to actually start typing within the cell, but you can see that as you start typing, FCS Express will actually give you hints about what each function does. Okay, so average obviously is simply just the average of the sum of different products. Excuse me, the sum of different values, where then you're going to divide by the number of input values. But you can see here that it makes it a lot easier where as I start typing, if I select the function, I can actually come in and start adding the parameters. So these hints will tell you what that function is for and what the required parameters are needed for that function to function. Okay, so you can see now that the software is actually prompting me for my first variable, number 1. At this point, I can click on a cell. And once I click on a cell, you can see here that it's telling me how to structure that formula. So between each variable, I need a comma. So as I enter that comma, you can see now that it's actually telling me what's the next variable that I need and whether it's required or optional. Okay, so at this point, then I can come in, select another parameter. And once I close my parentheses, I can just click OK or hit enter on my keyboard. And you see that FCS Express should automatically calculate whatever that function is. So this not only extends to the type of formulas that you would expect to find in Excel, This basically extends to any function that would be specific to FCS Express. So for example, maybe you're interested in trying to calculate a stain index. Obviously, you're not going to find a stain index specifically in Excel, but definitely in FCS Express, right? So once I start typing in stain index, I can click on that. And again, much like with the average, it's telling me what do I need to complete this formula. Okay, so for my first parameter is the mean or median of my positive population. Okay, and then using this histogram up here, you can see that my M2 marker is basically capturing that positive population. And I have a statistic for that marker reflected here within the spreadsheet, where if I click on that cell, you can now see that I have the coordinates entered into that formula. Again, if I hit the comma sign to bring me to my next variable, you'll see how these hints automatically update. Where at this point now I just need the mean or median of a negative population, and that would be here. And then finally, I need the standard deviation for my negative population, where if I just click on this, I can now just close my parentheses, and you'll see that FCS Express will automatically calculate that based off of the variables in that function. Okay. And as with any function, as I update my data, you can actually see how, as I move my markers around, you're going to see how the data is going to automatically update within any function that's calling a specific quadrant, a specific marker, or a specific gate within my FCS Express layout. Okay, very easy, very convenient, very intuitive to use. Okay, also, when you enter any of these functions, you'll notice that you can actually click on the link, and it will redirect you to our website, where you can find more information, more detail about that function on our website. Okay, very useful, very convenient. This was something that I personally loved. Okay. Again, if there are any questions, please feel free to enter them into the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel. Now, many of our customers, many of the people on this call actually, are customers of our security package. You have security enabled as part of the license that you use on a daily basis. And what that security package is, it's a way to meet 21 CFR Part 11 compliance in your analytical needs. So FCS Express has a number of different features that are available as part of this 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, where we provide different database options, whether you're using SQL, if you'd rather use a local database. Our security package allows you to use unique username and password access for all the different users in your lab. We provide access limitations, authority checks. We have over 300 independent security permissions that can be applied to various security groups, where these security permissions can define what permissions are available to the members of that group. We have audit trail capability, and we also have electronic signatures. Okay. If anyone on this call is not a security customer and you do have interest in learning more about our 21 CFR compliant package, please feel free to email us at support@denovosoftware.com. Also know that you can go to our website, where you can actually call up our 21 CFR Part 11 compliance matrix for FCS Express and look at all the different ways in which FCS Express meets 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. But specifically to our security customers, we do have a number of features that are either now available or will be available fairly soon. Okay, and one of those is what we call conditional electronic signatures. And this is, again, this is a feature that came through user feedback, where various users have actually mentioned to us over the years that they would actually like to control the ability to control what signatures can be used if other signatures have not been used yet as part of an analysis scheme. Okay, in other words, what I'm trying to say is, in this example, maybe you have two different signatures that are associated with a layout, analyzed and reviewed. Maybe you want to limit the ability to have a reviewed signature applied to that layout if it turns out it has not yet been analyzed. So now we can actually do that by making our signatures conditional. okay? And there's a number of different ways of how conditionality is actually used in FCS Express, whether it's in batch processing or visibility. We basically use the same logic that we use in those situations and apply that here to electronic signatures. Okay, so for example, and for those of you that aren't familiar with electronic signatures are a necessary feature in 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. For those of you that have used electronic signatures as part of that, you know that we do have a complete comprehensive set of features to allow the management and the recording of these electronic signatures within your FCS Express layout. And in FCS Express, there is no limit to the number of signatures that can be created as part of an analysis scheme. So for example, here's a basic layout. So for those of you that are security customers, you're familiar with the idea that we can come in and we can actually look at the electronic signatures and look at the signature list where we add electronic signatures. Now this may be familiar to some of you, but you'll notice now that it actually looks a little bit different, because now what we could do is we can actually allow the signing or the unsigning. So either process can actually be made conditional. Okay. We still have the ability to add signatures and define the groups for which those signatures are available, provide a description, but you now notice that we now have the ability to allow those signatures in specific conditions. Okay, so basically the way I had this example designed, so I have two signatures, one for analyzed, one for review. So analyzed, I would expect the users in a particular lab to use this as kind of like a first step in the signing off of data. And then review would be the final rubber stamping of your data to finalize that data. Okay, you'll notice that with the reviewed option, I've actually set this to have it conditional, because obviously I wouldn't want to review my data unless it's been analyzed by a previous group. Okay, and the way this manifests itself is if I actually try to analyze something or try to review something or try to sign something, if that condition is not met, I'm not going to have access to that signature. So at this point, I can only analyze, okay? Or any user that belongs to the group where a particular signature is enabled will only be able to use that particular signature, okay? And then just to show you again, if I show you my second option, okay, same layout. You can see now that it now has electronic signature for my analyzed signature. We have a convenient way to actually display these signatures in a table where if you right click in any text box, I can have FCS Express automatically insert my signature table, and this signature table will show me the signature, show me the status of that signature, whether it's been signed, unsigned, or never signed. If it has been signed or unsigned, it'll show me who that person is, who the user is that actually did the signing or unsigning, what the date, the time, and also the time zone in which that user is located. Okay. So now as an administrator, if I actually decide to go in and review this data and put my electronic signature on this data, if I go back to the same location as I did before, you'll now see that I have my reviewed option selected and available. So I can come in, put some notes. Click sign. And you'll see now it's added to the list. Okay. Again, another feature that came from user feedback where this was a necessary component as part of their workflow. Okay. So in our current, so that conditional electronic signature is available in beta right now, and it will be available in our next release. However, in our current release, we were able to include a new feature called system level audit trails. And the idea is that system level audit trails will actually allow FCS Express to track system level actions in an audit trail to add further compliance for 21 CFR Part 11. Okay, and what this is part of your security configuration. There is now an option to enable this feature, as well as to require a reason for change. So anytime anything was done on the system level, any change in password policy, permission was added to a user group, that's actually recorded as a system level audit trail. Okay, so we have the audit trail, the logging component of FCS Express that actually records anything that happens as part of the analysis of a layout. And we now have system level audit trails. So for example, if I go back to the layout that we just were looking at, you can view the overall audit trail as it pertains to the analysis here. You can actually see every change that was performed through the life of this layout. Okay, so this is a layout that I created recently, and you can see all the different changes that I added to it or I made to it. And you can see what the action was, who the username was, what the date was, what the time was that this change occurred, and also the details for whatever happened. So if something was signed or unsigned, we would actually see that within this logging audit trail. The system level audit trail is its own report. So if I click on security and I go to my reports tile, you'll now notice that there is a new option for all system level audits. Whereas this will show me all the different things that occurred on the system level. So if a layout was open or something was saved or something was closed without saving, we'll actually see those details here. We'll actually see the location where certain files were saved, details. If any reason for change was entered, you'll actually see that here. But you'll see how the system level audit trail basically captures anything, such as the layout being open, saved, closed, any type of change that was made to the security configuration. So whether you enabled system level audit trails, or if you'd made a change to a security group definition, or if you changed the password policy, whether maybe you required the max failed password attempts was changed from 0 to 3. All this is now captured within this system level audit trail. Okay. And we can enable that through your security configuration just by going to security, edit security configuration. And you'll now notice that there's an option for system level audits where we can enable this, and we can also require a reason for change, where anytime anything is actually changed on the system level, a box will appear requiring a reason for the change, and you actually will have to enter some type of sentence or something to describe why you're making the change that you're making. Okay, and again, this came back from user feedback. We've had many labs that actually needed this type of compliance with their QA team. So this was certainly a welcome addition to FCS Express. And with those system level audit trails, if you need the ability to export this data to text or HTML or XML, XSL, or to Excel, you have the ability to do that directly within this chart. Okay. So that basically brings us to the end of today's webinar. For those of you that are not members or users of FCS Express Clinical Edition, if you are interested in trying out FCS Express Clinical Edition, please feel free to contact us at support@denovosoftware.com. We'd be happy to set you up with a 30-day trial to let you try it. If you require the security component, you want to actually try that out too to see how that works for you, please let us know and we'll be happy to set that up for you. A special thanks to our developers, our support staff, and to obviously our customers, because a lot of these features would not be made possible without their feedback. So We certainly value the feedback that we get from customers, and our customers make a lot of this possible. Okay, so at this point, we will stay on the line for a couple more minutes to take any questions that you may have. If you need to leave, that's fine. Please feel free to contact us at support@denovosoftware.com if you have any questions, or again, if you're interested in trying out a demo of FCS Express Clinical Edition or the 21 CFR compliant features, please let us know. We'll be happy to set you up with that.